Welcome into the postgame, guys. Happy Thanksgiving week to everybody. You'll probably notice I am somewhere else for Thanksgiving week. And the Rockets, just without Kevin Durant, go into Phoenix and get a monster win behind the lead of Amen Thompson, who I'm here with my good friend Ben DuBose. Ben, I thought Amen was just spectacular in this game. Rockets win 114-92, and against a team that had they lost today, they would have been technically behind the Suns in the standings.
So what did the men finish with tonight? 28? I know he shot 10 of 16.
28, 8, and 7.
So he's had 50 points in his last two games. And he was 10 of 18 on Friday. Tonight he was 10 of 16. So that's 20 of 34 for 50 points in his last two games. That's pretty good. And Dave, I know you look at games the same way I do, or at least similarly, in that we're always looking for where the meat is being left on the bone. That's an analogy I've used a couple of times in our post-game pods. And I think you can certainly argue that certainly Reed Shepherd has outkicked his coverage relative to expectations going into the year. Maybe a little bit Alperen Şengün. So if those guys fall off and Reed in particular struggled tonight as a shooter, at least for the first half of the game, then where are you going to be able to pick up the slack? And obviously tonight there was no Kevin Durant, so there was a lot of slack to pick up. Well, the meat that was being left on the bone was from Amen Thompson, and perhaps the analogy is even more fitting since it's Thanksgiving week. But I mean, Amen the last two games, he started the first 13 games for the Rockets shooting like, I want to say 46% from the field. And these last two, I mean, it's made a world of difference. We didn't talk about it that much against the Nuggets because it felt like, coming out of the Denver game, the main storylines were primarily that you lost, and KD and Şengün both had bad nights. And then secondly, among reasons you were close, Reed Shepherd was the headliner. But Amen was very good, and he was finishing better in that game, and he finished a lot better tonight as well. His footwork on the drives was much better. He finished through contact. And I went and looked last year, Dave. It's been a little more exaggerated this year, but it's really not that dissimilar. If you look at his sophomore season, through 5 games, he was shooting 46%. Through the first 10 games, he was at 51%. Then the final, whatever it was, I think 60 or so games that he played, he was about 56%, and that's the Amen that we saw for the majority of last season. Well, it feels like maybe slightly exaggerated this year in that it took until these last couple, which were games 14 and 15, but it feels like that touch is coming back. And the more you think about it, it wouldn't shock me if the men just stylistically is a slow starter, because his style of play, you cannot replicate it in the offseason, in that, the athleticism is still going to be there, but defenders are not going to contest him in the offseason when he's attacking off the dribble the way he does in real NBA games. And because defenders aren't defending it the same way, then he's not getting used to the difficulty of finishing that it takes against NBA big men who are going vertical, who are pushing you in the back, from the side, whatever the case may be. And I just think our very first pod, Dave, like if you go back and look at the first preseason recap that we did at the beginning of October, I made the point that Amen was someone who, to me, isn't the same in the preseason because he doesn't want to throw his body into harm's way. Well, I think a similar logic can be said for early in the season, but in a different way. Like he's more willing to throw his body into harm's way, but because he's not used to defenders, I don't care what they say in training camp, in preseason, in gym runs in the offseason, they are not defending him nearly as physically, as aggressively as they do in real NBA games with stakes. Then it takes him a little bit of time to sort of figure out, the craft element of the game and get the touch back, what it takes to finish at those awkward angles and through contact. Well, it feels like the last couple of games against teams that, the Suns were undermanned a little bit, but they do have physical bigs inside. And obviously the Nuggets the other night with Jokic and Valanciunas, to me, it feels less about who Amen is playing and more that he's in better rhythm. He just seems much more comfortable with the ball in his hands. And the reason I bring up that context, to me, it feels sustainable. What he's doing, it feels like what we saw for the majority of last season, and all the theories about, why isn't he finishing as well? Is it because he's being asked to be a point guard? Does he need to be off ball more? Maybe it's just he was a little bit rusty. It took him some time, and now he's coming along. And if he is, Dave, then that gives the Rockets so much of a buffer in case anyone else on the team falls off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been a little bit of a forgotten guy because, we had this kind of narrative of KD and Shingun are the superstars and everybody else needs to fall in line. Amen Thompson is a star, in my opinion. He has not, I agree, started out that this year on an offense from an offensive standpoint in that way. His true shooting percentage is significantly down this year. Ben, there were so many times in this game, I don't think there's any bias in saying this, that I was just like,
Yeah.
OMG, watching this guy make these moves. And you heard the broadcasters on the Peacock broadcast and Austin Rivers just drooling over this guy. I mean, the thing is, he has some finishing issues that he's, as you just perfectly outlined, that he has shown, earlier this year, but the athleticism is up. I mean, it is top 1, top 2, top 3 in the league, whatever you wanna say, it is up there. He has moves that he's gotta be able to finish and obviously, and be able to shoot. That's a big thing for him, big thing. But this is a dog. I mean, he is busting it on both ends of the floor. You can just see it. He took that elbow to the chin
Yeah.
in this game, and you could just see in his eyes like this competitiveness, and he was going to go back out there, and he got patched up, and sure enough was back out there, and ironically knocked down a big three to kind of sort of put it away. I just can't say enough good things about this guy. Now he's leading the team in net rating. It was I think a plus 25 tonight. I need to double check that, but just an absolutely fantastic game from Ahmed tonight.
And the ability to go both directions, the Euro step, the hesitation moves that he has. Quite frankly, Dave, it reminds me of Donovan Mitchell, the craft that he has going downhill. I thought that watching Mitchell last week against the Rockets, the start, stop, the ability to go in either direction. And the reason I bring that up, even though Amin has struggled to start this year, at least from an efficiency perspective, I feel like the moves have still been there. It's just he hasn't finished as well. Like I feel like if you ran the film of the first 13 games before he's really come on the last two, and we just didn't talk about him after the Denver game because there were other storylines to get to. But the first 13 games, I really don't think that it was that different than the way he played last season. It was just that he missed the shots. Like he got into good spots on the floor. He seemed in control. Nothing seemed dramatically different other than he wasn't finishing as well. And, if that continues over a large sample, of course you worry about it. I mean, it's fundamental to the game. You have to be able to make shots, but he started slow last season, and perhaps it's as simple as he started slow this season, and now the last two games he's starting to get going. And I see a comment in the chat that maybe he needs to play on the wing more because the last two games Reed Shepherd has played a lot. Tonight he started. I mean, there's maybe some of that, but Dave, I thought a lot of what happened tonight was him creating with the ball in his hands, taking it at the top of the key and making a play. So I'm not going to say there's nothing to that. I mean, perhaps having Reed to sort of share the ball handling duties and some of the playmaking, it allows him to have a little bit more juice. Maybe there's something to that, but I don't think that it's not like he's just cutting off ball. No, he made a ton of plays with the ball in his hands, just in an ISO situation, go out and make a tough move, and he did it.
Yeah, and that's well said, Ben, because I think you can attest to this. I mean, the Rockets will tell you in response to that criticism that, oh, he's not a point guard or you need a point guard. They feel like they're doing just fine. I mean, obviously the offensive rating tells you quite a bit, but also they want to put the ball in the hands of a man. They want him to create. They want him to learn and grow. And he is such a force when he's downhill. Goodness, I mean, yeah, today was just an eye-opening reminder of just what this guy is capable of, and what he could be. Just super excited. There's a lot of guys
Yeah.
like this. Obviously, Shengun's had a good year. Katie's obviously amazing. We're seeing great things from Reed, but don't sleep on a man. Like this guy is really, really good.
And these last two games, even though you lost the Denver game, in the big picture are really feel good because if KD starts to show some signs of aging, and he's 37 years old, it's not the end of the world if he slips a little bit. But look, for the season as a whole, he's at just over 48% overall, 36% on three, 61% true shooting. That's still really good. He's the leading scorer on an 11-4 team that's now won 11 of their last 13 games. So clearly he's still an all-star, probably all NBA level player. But if you buy into the notion, and the sample is still small, that maybe there's some slippage, he is 37, father time is undefeated. Well, guys like Amin and Reed being able to step up the way they have the last two games, that's the slack that can be picked up. And I mentioned earlier, if you think Şengün's played, even by his standards, a little too well to start the season, in other words, maybe it's not sustainable, then if Şengün falls off a little bit, okay, this is where you can pick up the slack. The same can be said for the insane efficiency. Reed Shepherd tonight winning the game had like a true shooting of 66%, which is absolutely amazing. Is that sustainable along with 49% from three? I don't know. I hope it is, but we'll see. Now, there's some comments in the chat. Reed, even though it was a little bit of an off shooting night for him, he did still make an impact. The vision with his passes, defensively, had a couple of big plays. So wasn't a bad game by any means, but he just didn't shoot at the blistering efficiency that we had gotten accustomed to the last few weeks. But look, if those things regress a little bit, and I don't think any of them are going to regress hard, but even if those things just regress a little bit, then sure, you worry about the margins are thin. The Rockets have had some close wins. So how can you upset that? Well, if you have the versions of Reed Shepherd you had Friday and Amen Thompson the last two games, then you can offset a lot of slippage elsewhere. And so to me, that's really encouraging. And you just put on the screen, Amen's the headliner, but he was far from alone. Jabari improved handle. That 94-foot sequence he had in the third quarter was unbelievable. I don't even want to think about what happens if Jabari tries that move the last couple of years.
Did it try?
And I also think, the Suns are a team to this point in the season, and we'll see how sustainable it is when they play tougher competition. There was a stat that, they've had a pretty weak strength of schedule to this point. But look, the Suns are a classic example of the sum is greater than the individual parts, at least to this point in the season. Like, you wouldn't look at that roster and think, especially without Jalen Green, that that's an 11-6 team. But they play hard. They have the right culture. And so when you're on the road and you're without your superstar in KD, it's important for you to match that culture. And certainly, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, part of the reason they're such valuable players in the big picture, it's not just how good they are individually, but, they both have just a perfect profile as a teammate. Like, they play so hard. They set the right example. They're perfect Ime Udoka culture guys. But you go down the bench with who the Rockets were missing tonight relative to the formula they thought they had in mid-September. They're down 4 of their 9 expected rotation players. Obviously, no Fred and DFS, but you also didn't have Tariq and you didn't have Kevin Durant. And so you had 3 minimum guys playing major minutes tonight in Aaron Holiday, Josh Okogie, and JD Davidson. And all of them played really well. Like, I thought, Josh Okogie isn't as skilled as Dylan Brooks, but I thought he played every bit as hard. And perhaps, Okogie played a lot of the last few seasons in Phoenix. So perhaps, we should have been talking more about, Dylan was really good, as you would expect, in a revenge game against the Rockets. Well, Okogie had his own revenge game against the Suns and played really well. But I just thought between the 3 of them, they matched the intensity. And those are minimum guys. So shout out to, Rafael Stone, Eli Whitus, Patrick Fertitta, the front office. You can give much of the credit to Ime Udoka and the way he has guys at the end of the bench ready. But I think the bottom line is, if you can match the culture of the Suns, and to their credit, they seem to have come a long way. We'll see how sustainable it is. I hope it's not too sustainable because the Rockets have, that 2027 pick. But for now, things seem to be going well there. But it's like, if you can match the culture, then the Rockets, even without KD, just with Amen and Şengün, have more high-end talent. And I feel like that's what happened. Like, Dylan was great, as you would expect. But between Okogie's defense and transition play and Aaron Holiday's shot making, those two sort of offset Dylan, I felt like. JD Davidson gave them some good minutes. And so between that, I'll just call them the try-hard trio of Okogie, Holiday, and JD Davidson. And so they sort of matched the culture from the Suns. And when you match that culture, and then you have the high-end talent like Amen, Şengün, and I'll throw Jabari Smith in there as well. Like, there's a reason he was drafted at 3, for all the talk that, people are asking how much skill does he have. Maybe he's not as skilled as the typical, top 3 pick, but he's still pretty damn skilled. Like, there's a lot of things that he can do. He's looked better in flashes this year. He got short a little bit more with Kevin Durant out tonight. But yeah, you match the culture, and the Rockets just have more high-end talent. And I think that's what we saw tonight.
Yeah, so I want to talk briefly about Jabari, or I should say, before we talk about Jabari, I want to talk a little bit about, Reed Shepherd, 2 of 9 tonight. The broadcast talked about sort of the targeting, but he did have some good defensive pressures. I think with him, he makes some spectacular defensive plays, but a lot of it is those, risks going out there and trying to take those passes, and some of them pay off really well. Some don't, not so much. But tonight, after this really hot run he's been on, was just 2 for 9. But picking up the slack again tonight, Aaron Holiday hits 6 threes, scores 22 points. What a luxury. This guy isn't even in the rotation for the most part. He's playing because guys are are out, and he has been amazing. That's one. And yeah, I'll certainly let you talk about that as well. But Jabari tonight, I thought the handle was so much like there were times where you
Oh, yeah.
see how he's improved that handle. Twice, as you mentioned, he went the length of the floor, grabbed a rebound, and just bolted and drove through traffic and went the rest of the way. I'm not saying he's got an elite handle or even this great handle, but it's so much better than what it used to be. Did you see that one play where I think he drove, kicked it to, I think, Okogie, and then Okogie right back to him? I think it was Okogie. Maybe it was a man, but right back to Jabari for the dunk. That was beautiful. Twice in the fourth quarter, he drove and drew the defense and kicked it to Capella. Capella couldn't quite finish, but he had created an opening for Capella. These are just things that, yeah, for somebody like Şengün, that's, commonplace. But for Jabari, these are significant improvements. I thought they were on
Sure.
display tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as Aaron Holiday, the 10 threes, obviously 6 makes, always looks good. But the volume, I think, was really important. The Rockets had 31 threes as a team, and Holiday had 10 of them. And I think against a team like Phoenix, and you did have a rest advantage going in. They played last night. Now, both of those games were in Phoenix, I believe, so they didn't have the travel in between. But you did have a rest advantage. And I think you also, even without KD, had a talent advantage. So how can you get beaten? Well, I mentioned the culture, but you can also get beaten by math. And early in the game, we saw the Suns putting up a ton of threes. The Rockets got better defensively as the game moved along at taking away those threes. For the final box, the Suns had 37 attempts from three. The Rockets had 31. That's pretty damn close. And a lot of that comes down to Aaron Holiday. And I think that's going to be pretty important moving forward. Like, obviously, Aaron's going to play because Tari Eason is nowhere near coming back. It does look like Kevin Durant's only going to miss one more game. But even when KD comes back, Holiday was already in the rotation. And you look at who the Rockets have coming up. So Golden State on Wednesday, that's going to be a difficult game. Golden State always is. We'll see if they have Draymond Green, but the Rockets, according to reports, are not going to have Kevin Durant. So that game, I don't care what Golden State's record is, in San Francisco, presumably with Steph Curry, it's going to be difficult. And I assume with Jimmy Butler as well. That's probably going to be something close to a pick'em in terms of the line. That's just my guess. But then after Golden State, you have that one difficult game going into Thanksgiving. Next week, Dave, that might be, on paper, your easiest week of the year.
Yep.
You have 2 games against Utah, then Sacramento, Phoenix at home, and Dallas. And so when you play teams like that, there's 2 ways that you can lose: culture or math. Well, there's more than 2 ways, but those are the 2 easiest ways that you can lose. And so when your end of the bench guys play the way the try-hard trio did tonight, that's what I'm going to nickname them. We'll see if it takes off. But, between Holiday, Okogie, and J.D. Davidson, the culture was there. It wasn't a game that the Suns could just claim based on, being at home and trying harder the way they have in a lot of their wins this year. And from a math perspective, the Suns early in the game, if you look at the first quarter box, I did worry a little bit. They're putting up so many threes, saying, hold on, the Suns under their new coach are a very, analytics-friendly unit right now. And so I wondered, hey, are the Rockets going to lose the math game in this, especially without KD? Not that KD's a super high-volume 3 guy, but obviously he's one of the greatest shooters of all time, so he helps you from a spacing perspective. And when Holiday came in and made those 4 threes, I feel like in the first 10 or so minutes of the game for him, like that completely changed the flow of the game. And for the game overall, it made it to where the Rockets matched them from a culture perspective. They came close to matching them from a math perspective. And if they do that, then they're just going to have more high-end talent. And that's especially going to be important in the next week when the schedule eases up. And it should be that talent advantage even more so when they get Kevin Durant back.
Yeah. It's funny watching Dylan Brooks tonight, who, by the way, was awesome. Obviously was very amped up for this game, 29 points, 11 of 22 from the field, and hitting some shots that you're like, Dylan, wow, he was impressive. I also think watching him, I guess I get that clarity of, oh, that's what we got away with for 2 years, right? Guy does get away with a lot of fouls. I mean, we have the same thing, I think, in a way with Okogie and that type, and the men play at times with that type of physical defense. I mean, you can look at the entire OKC roster and say the same thing. So it's not abnormal, but he was, I thought, really, really good tonight. But what's interesting is the Rockets technically were out rebounded 51-50 tonight. They really feasted in transition, 18-4. As you said, they continue to shoot well from 3-point range, over 41% tonight. And I think it was 52-30 points in the paint as well. We didn't mention Şengün. The thing I liked about Şengün tonight, I didn't think he played up to the level of the physicality in this game. I think he had 5 boards.
Agree.
He just looked at times, especially early on, a little bit soft. I'm not saying Şengün's a soft player, just he did tonight. He still had some star level moves in this game,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
one when Booker was guarding him and he had a double spin, which was gorgeous. But
Had a couple of nice threes, too.
that's what I was going to get at. He's hitting the threes. So he started out, I think he was
That's the
I think he's
clutch.
2 for 3, ended up missing another one later on, but 2 for 4 tonight from 3-point range. This just continues. We're talking about Jabari's handle. Got to talk about Şengün's three as well. That is a really, really good sign. Boy, when a men's three comes around like this, I mean, they're just going to be cooking with gas
Yeah.
at that point. So, I mean,
I
I
also
was
think
just
the
really
rebound
happy with the way it went. This game went.
I also think the rebounding, you wouldn't think that losing Kevin Durant is a big deal for the rebounding battle because he's not a big rebounder himself. But I actually do think it's a factor just because the Rockets don't have the collective size advantage as a team. And so KD, even if he's not a great rebounder, he's someone that because he's 7 feet tall, opposing defenses have to pay a lot of attention to him to keep him off the glass. It's just, it may be subconscious, but you see a guy that big, you give more resources to him. And when Kevin's not out there, then the big guys you have, and they didn't start double big tonight. So
No.
Şengün was the only big out there, but whether it's Şengün and Adams or just Şengün or just Adams, they get more attention paid to them when the Rockets aren't as big across the board. And in this game, it's fine. Obviously, the floor was more opened up for men who took advantage. All that matters is winning. Jabari took advantage as well. So you can't complain. I just think the rebounding is sort of a byproduct of, they didn't go double big. There was no KD, and just collectively, they weren't as big across the board. And so I think, were there plays that Şengün was a little bit soft? Absolutely. I'm sure he'd be the first to admit that. But I also think some of it's just sort of tactically. The Rockets made the choice to play with, a little more pace, as Amin said in his post-game interview, to sort of open up the floor. He took advantage. So did Jabari. So did Aaron Holiday. So did J.D. Davidson. You can go up and down the roster. Obviously, it was the right strategy because this was a really good offensive game for the Rockets.
Yeah, absolutely. So we Rockets, as you mentioned, they're going to play Golden State on Wednesday. Before we wrap up, just curious your thoughts on this game. Draymond, as you kind of highlighted earlier, Draymond may be out for this one with I guess apparently Donovan Mitchell landed on his right ankle, I believe, sprain. Hard to see him back for this game. That is huge because it's kind of that physical defender that kind of can complicate things for Şengün. We'll see how that game plays out. That would be a huge win if you could get that without KD.
Rockets Warriors, it's always nice to win in that building. I'm sorry. Like, we've all been through trauma over the years. So if the Rockets win, it doesn't matter how it comes. But I also think, like, without KD, I'm just curious, like, who can land the plane? Like, I doubt the Rockets are good enough unless the Warriors have widespread injuries, i.e. more than just Draymond. Like, maybe if it's Draymond and Jimmy or Steph, something that we haven't heard yet. Assuming the Warriors are anywhere close to full strength, I think at least it's going to be a competitive game. And without KD, who's going to land the plane? The one game that the Rockets won at Golden State in the playoffs was the one where Fred just went nuts down the stretch and basically lifted them to that Game 6 win. Obviously, Fred's not available now. So I am sort of curious, like, it's early in the year. Cup's probably off the table. For anyone curious about the NBA Cup math and the schedule ramifications, go to ClutchFans.net, and I've got a blog detailing all the scheduling options. Spoiler alert, there's probably going to be another Rockets-Warriors game in Houston added to the schedule in that second week of December. But as far as this game, I just want to see who from the Rockets' young guns, since there's no KD, is going to step up and hopefully make big shots down the stretch. It's not Oracle Arena, but I still want to call it Oracle based on all that we've been through over the years. To me, that's the big question. They finally got that breakthrough win on the road in the playoffs. They couldn't close out the series, but they did get the Game 6 on the road, and it was Fred that took them to the finish line. Well, now there's no Fred. There's no KD. So given the history, and you better believe anybody that's in a Rockets uniform, even if they weren't on the team last year, let alone in the 2020s, I'm sure Clint Capella's going to be having some bad flashbacks. Everybody's aware of the history. And so if you see a young guy like Amin, like Jabari, like Reed, whoever it is, stepping up and getting you to the finish line, that's bigger than one game out of 82. We'll see if they can do it, but I would love to see it. To me, I'm actually sort of looking forward to it in that without KD, there's lower expectations. Like, I don't see a scenario where unless someone gets hurt that I'm going to be devastated based on the result, even if they lose. But boy, if you can win that game at Golden State, the gear Steph has. Look at how he played in the 2 games they won at San Antonio against the Spurs with Wemby. I mean, it's an opportunity. That's how I'm looking at it. And if Amen and Jabari continue to play the way they did tonight, and hopefully Reed, but Şengün as well. Şengün had an off game tonight, relatively speaking. Maybe he's due for an uptick. Let's see if your young guys can beat Steph and Jimmy in San Francisco. If they can, that's a feel-good win that's bigger than one of 82.
Absolutely. That's Ben DuBose. Guys, I appreciate everyone who's come in and supported us tonight. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving week with family, friends, loved ones. Like I said, we may go Wednesday night, probably not, but we'll see how that goes. But for sure, we'll be back for the next Sunday game. So I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving, and go Rockets. Thanks, everybody.